the advances that have taken place in deep learning over the last 5 to 6 years, I would say, are as fundamental as the advent of electricity. So when you put that in context, you start to say, okay, well, we're just getting started. It's now you can have the toaster, the microwave oven, the TV, lights, all of that can now start to happen. And all of that we've seen so far is really just the first wave of it all. The objective today was to say, okay, well, what's happening with it here in India? And really, how is it getting used? And so we reached out, and we've got 3 people who are joining us, and it's intended as a conversation, and none of this is a presentation. Honestly, this one is going to be driven by my curiosity first, and then Sid and Prashant will each have their conversations as well. So I'm going to just kick it off right now with Dale, who's, please come on up. Maybe we'll just start with that. I mean, the history and how you've seen it evolve. I mean, at the very beginning, it was a very simple thing. People who bought this, bought that. And that was really nice. And that was such a good way to get people to do more things. How did it go from there to the next step? And what really was that next step? And where do you see it currently in let's start in e-commerce and what's really changing in that?
So I joined Amazon in 2007. At the time, they had already launched recommendations. I remember the team itself was maybe 5 or 6 engineers with 1 manager. That was basically the team that was powering this entire capability for Amazon. I think the background there was a lot of the math already existed. The math around collaborative filtering already existed. The changes that happened was basically the amount of processing power that you could bring to bear and the data that you can collect that can allow us to use more complex algorithms over time. So a basic algorithm that basically try to match customers to other customers based on like similarities. So you've bought these items, she's bought these items. So maybe when she buys the next item, you may want to check it out. That's basically the logic behind collaborative filtering. We just try to match like pairs. But then when you think about more and more use cases, now you start to think about, but then you did something different because on that day you did something different and maybe there's a different need that you were trying to meet. So as you get more and more data, you start to realize that the use cases that customers are trying to solve for are many and varied. And now that you have those use cases in hand and you have the processing power, you can start to be a lot more granular, a lot more specific about what specific recommendation to give. So at the end of the day, if you look at the Amazon site, it still gives you a recommendation on what customers bought and what you should buy. But the way it does it, I think the amount of use cases it now thinks about is very different. Because it may look at saying that maybe today is a Thanksgiving holiday. So the recommendation I give you today is very different from the recommendation I give you on a regular day of the week. Or maybe you are sitting in Seattle and the recommendation you get because you are in Seattle is very different from the recommendation you get based in the Bay Area. So I think from a product capability perspective, the amount of precision and the accuracy that we've been able to bring to bear on these capabilities have increased over time. I think the biggest contrast that I saw, especially leaving Amazon India and joining Swiggy, is just the data quality in India is so diverse compared to the data quality in the US. The customers are not the same. In the US, you could be sitting in, say, the Bay Area, or you could be sitting in New York, and if you look up a book, you'll probably find the same recommendation on Amazon.com. Or if you look up a generic keyword like jeans, you'll find the same recommendation. But if I'm sitting in India, a customer in Chennai is different from a customer in Delhi. Or a customer in Punjab is different from a customer sitting in, say, Bengal. Right? So there's an extreme diversity in the data. So that's one of the first realizations we had, that we really need to think hyper-local in how we build products here in Swiggy. The second, yes. The second, I think the difference is also that in India, the data itself is extremely unstructured and sparse. So multiple use cases. We collect data from our drivers as they are driving through on deliveries. And every 10 seconds, we are supposed to get a ping back from their phone that tells us where the driver is. So we can use that to do things like route optimizations and planning and so on. Now drivers, every once in a while, turn off their phones because guess what? Their battery is low, so they just turn off their phone. So now you have a missing set of pings from a driver and then boop, suddenly they come online. So you're trying to build like algorithms on top of that. With that missing data, the algorithm isn't able to understand what happened. Did the driver go off, or did something happen, or was there truly a reason why the driver stopped? And so that's where you've got to worry about saying, how do we fill in even gaps in terms of sparse data? How do we fill in missing information that isn't there? And how do we bring that in the India context.
And so now we can see its current use cases, but as you kind of look forward a little bit more, where do you see it in the food space now? Where are you guys saying, wow, if we could really get there, that would really shake things up in a massive way?
Perceptive AI is interesting, where we want to be able to understand what the customer needs even before they state that need. And a classic example of this in a smaller way is like the Netflix use case, where you're just feeling like watching a movie and then you open up Netflix and then it tells you, here are some movies based on a Friday night watching or binge watching movies, or here are movies that you may like from a horror perspective or comedy and so on. Similarly with food, I think one of the areas that we haven't done a good job so far is being able to provide the serendipitous discovery for food. Swiggy is a very functional app where you go in, you know what you want, you buy it, and then you're out. But we want to bring some fun into this equation where I want customers to be able to come to the app and say, I'm just feeling hungry and give me options, right? And we should be able to understand food. For example, if I understand that two dishes have the same ingredients, maybe they both are having methi as a common spice, or maybe they're both baked as a common preparation style. Can I link them together so that I can provide you that recommendation where you just like something that is baked, then I take you in this journey where I show you more dishes that allow you to then find and discover new local favorites. That's what we call the food graph. It's something that we are looking to work on. Food graph is the equivalent of social network, but for food, where we link food dishes together and relate them based on the information they have, the cuisine style, the calorific value, the ingredients they contain, and so on. And then allow that food graph to then help customers navigate food.
I could just see the future. That how many likes does this food have? How many hearts does it get? All that, right?
All that just feeds into who gets that next dish as a recommendation.
There is a new AI-led idea on everything. And actually, it's been hard for us sometimes to decipher what's real and what's not, and what's actually going to have impact and what's not. And so, as we sort of think about this a little bit further, and think about Haptik, maybe something that I'd love to understand, and maybe everybody else also, is one, at what point did you transform? Because Haptik wasn't always I never saw the words AI when I first met you. In fact, I don't think we had AI as a vocabulary 5 years ago.
We changed with the times.
There you go. But what specifically changed and led you to change to transform this platform? And second of all is answering this question, if you can think about the following, which is, because you have customers today and you had customers yesterday, and some of them are the same customers, I'm assuming. What were those customers not able to do, or what are they not able to do yesterday, which they're able to do today, because you're now the world's leading conversational AI platform?
Yeah. So just adding to your first point around, startup pitches being very sort of AI centric, right? And I think what we were trying to do over there was, our take, or what we also realized along the way, is that I think, in the previous session, Sandeep spoke about this, and they said, AI is really an enabler, right? AI is like a set of tools, right? The question is, today when you think of building a new product, right, you don't say, I have to build this as a mobile app. You think about where's your audience going to be, where are they going to transact, where are they going to engage, and that could very well be on a website or a mobile website, in which case you mean that you may not need a mobile app. I think it's the same case with, AI, right, which is that it's an enabler to accomplish a certain product or a solution for a specific customer or an audience, right? So if somebody is building a really cool doorknob, your real question is not what's the AI that's gone into it. Your real question is who's really going to use it.
Got me to think about the fact that we're looking at some ideas today where vernacular is going to become a lot larger part of certain businesses going forward. And with geo and everything else, 500 million, 600 million, and maybe more over time. And most of these folks, maybe they're not even comfortable typing. Mm-hmm. And for most of them, it'll be communicating through pictures or through voice. Would we be able to use AI, in voice? And if so, what kind of impact could that have, do you think?
Yeah. So, firstly, obviously, these are things that even sort of I am and we are learning along the way, right? One key distinction is that, look, AI can mean like 500 things. And the specific piece of of voice recognition that sort of the specific part of voice recognition is the entire concept behind natural language understanding, right? So NLU is the one piece of AI that specifically goes into...
I understand that well.
Yeah, that specifically goes into voice. To answer your question, firstly, on the voice bit, right? Completely agree with you, and we are huge believers that a large part of the internet audience that comes online as the next phase are going to be voice-first users, specifically because of the vernacular context, right? People in vernacular languages, find it inconvenient to browse through regular interfaces.
Exactly.
Of the graphical user interface of a mobile app or a website, and obviously they're never going to type, right? I think even if you look at WhatsApp's usage and WhatsApp's data, nobody ever types in local languages, and voice messages are very highly used. So, and you obviously mentioned Geo. Some of the data that they've been able to release around the usage of the Geo phone and how people are actually using voice commands. So absolutely, that is a massive area. I think everybody from Amazon, Google, us at the smaller scale, we're all working towards finding solutions within voice interfaces. There's obviously a lot of different paths that you could take. Again, it's like saying that it's the internet, right? Now, what does a voice-enabled application mean? You can do several things. You can do voice-based search. You can do voice-based customer support. You can build a voice interactive assistant like Alexa or Google Home. And that's a very unique challenge to India, to build it in all these different languages.
Exactly.
Particularly to build it in what we call English, right? You could still find data for like Hindi, Gujarati, and Marathi on different places. How do you aggregate data for mixed language?
Right.
And also one of the things that we've seen in some of our early experiments with voice is that people are significantly more disciplined when typing.
Okay.
When people are typing, you're a lot more disciplined about the way you type. You think about the words you use. You think about the language. When you talk, people really lose that discipline, right? You're not really look, just the way we talk, right? I mean, I'm not thinking about punctuation marks.
Right.
I'm not thinking about what words in which order I'm using. That's just an incredible challenge to solve if you add the mixed language on top.
Got it.
If you add people speaking in two languages at the same time and not being disciplined at all, it's a very interesting problem which a lot of people are going after.
So, what should we be thinking about? What are the kind of things that would kind of equip us to become better 10, 15, 20 years from now, knowing perhaps what we saw in the movie, in the last movie?
I'll tell you what I think, at least maybe more short term, right? Maybe more short term in terms of how I think about it. And one of the things, maybe this is some context to answer this, but definitely one of the things I think about very often is that if and when I was to start another company, within the first 3 people that I would hire would be a data scientist. Even before potentially, some other very key roles, what you would obviously think, right? But that would be one of the first key team members that I would bring on board. I just think any business, and we were talking about this on the phone, I think, right? I think even if you're selling t-shirts, right? There is an element in which you can build in predictability. You can build in supply chain efficiency. All of these are AI tools. All of this is machine learning, right? All of this is just understanding, predicting behavior.
Ganesh has spent about 20 years in fashion and worked with Reliance Retail, worked with Tommy Hilfiger, with Arvind, and most recently with Myntra, where actually he used AI in very interesting ways in fashion, and now runs his own company, Stylumia, which maybe you could spend a couple of minutes.
One of the biggest challenges I personally faced is that you take a lot of decisions on a daily basis. Which product, for example, let's say any fashion brand starts making, whether t-shirt, dresses, whatever. If I give you a statistic, 1 out of 2 products made in the world, it's sold on discount. 1 out of every 2 products. Now that's a humongous number, which is the probability of success, therefore like a coin toss, right? So do you really need fashion experts? Is the first fundamental question. In spite of these experts, that's the success, just not in India, this is global number. How do you figure out that globally what's happening in the categories of interest, in the spaces of interest and prices of interest, all of that, and make sense out of it. One is data collection, second is making sense out of it. The complexity in fashion is because it has image. Let me explain to you, why that complexity. For example, the simple t-shirt I'm wearing, can you just explain what it is? Blue,
Collared.
polo,
Buttons.
t-shirt, right? We stop at some point now, maybe cotton, that's it, right? Now we give this description, all this, and give it to a designer sitting in another room who hasn't seen this t-shirt. What's the probability she will make it the way you see it? Yeah, very low probability because there is zillion combinations of what you said is possible, which means every single word is subjective. Blue itself is subjective, collar is subjective, everything is subjective, sleeve is subjective. Now the question is that the entire industry is running on the subjective view of the data itself. For if you can't analyze images, you can't derive insights. For one is to collect this global data and then analyze both images and text. I'm not saying that text is not important, but there are some functional attributes sitting in text, right? Cotton is sitting in text, the image will not tell you. For use a combination of vision and replicate the human brain and use the text as an add-on to it. And what we do is have two neural networks which runs one on image, one on text, and we come out with, for every single item, a unique ISBN equivalent number for every fashion product. For you, decode the fashion DNA. I would call AI as a pattern recognition engine. For AI is just a technology today, right? Tomorrow something else will come. For what humans are used to is, we are great in recognizing patterns. For it's just a technology to recognize patterns. So I would call it that, it's a pattern recognition capability that we are building on. And if AI gives you, do that. Tomorrow something else, how do we recognize patterns faster? For what we are doing in fashion for that is textual attributes again, as we saw now it's imperfect, right? You can't make out from few textual attributes. For we use the entire image. Let's say you take every image of a t-shirt, for example, would be 400 by 400 pixel. We are talking about 16,000 pixels is a parameter. Every pixel can have an RGB value. For we are talking about 48,000 parameters. For every single t-shirt, go through the Stylumia engine with 48,000 parameters. Just the image only. Then we add all the meta text attributes on top of this and all the other impressions in terms of the price and various stuff. We are talking about over 50,000 combinations of parameters and we have over 3 billion impressions of fashion products. We're pretty young, just 3-year-old. Now just see the amount of data that we will have, which a designer in our busy schedule will not be able to map, recognize, and even identify that pattern. Because they all work on timelines. So that's how we are able to improve effectiveness of, how do we get their product right to the customer.
I mean, earlier we were talking about how India has a lot of data. And Netflix is obviously using a tremendous amount of data points to be able to map movies, to be able to understand our user behavior. If you were to do the same thing in fashion today, is there a company that's outside of Stitch Fix that is even close to being able to map human or any customer needs at that kind of level?
Business is not considering data as raw material as much as t-shirt. They're busy making the t-shirt, they're not busy adding value of data. So I would say first, the primary stuff is awareness of AI for the entire organization. And AI doesn't come unless data is good. And data contribution is not from data scientists. I think we are all just hiring data scientists doesn't solve the problem. First, you create awareness. The store manager enables data for that company, right? The store associate enables data for the company. The entire organization has to be aware that we need to be data aware because I contribute to the intelligence of this company. But that needs to come in.
Because fashion is a massive, like you said, massive part of how we're hurting the planet. Are you seeing some of the AI being used along these lines with companies? Because we're seeing very little of it.
Today, this whole area of wastage is looked at as a sustainability issue globally, right? And if you really see H&M and Zara today, the only thing they communicate today is we want to make a sustainable planet. Because there is a huge uproar in terms of fast fashion. Because they have created a habit of people buying more and more garments. When you buy more and more, what do you do with it? And research has shown that only 20% of the garments are frequently used. which means there is a high frequency of purchase, low consumption, there is a lot of dump. And, if I give you some statistics, you'll be amazed. Do you know how long it takes for a shoe to decompose? It's 30 to 40 years. A polyester and nylon garment in the same space. For whatever we are throwing away, it's all getting dumped in landmines. And we are making the planet really, really unsustainable. The approach to solving this problem so far has been, let's use recyclable materials. Let's change the material. People say, I'm using organic cotton, I've reduced polyester, all of that. But nobody looked at, how do I, first of all, make less? To do $1 billion business, today I'm making maybe $500 million of material, right? Can I make less? Because my inefficiencies are very huge. For we see worldwide the approach that we are taking. I'm not sure, I'm sure maybe somebody is thinking, and I see enough opportunity for many more startups to just not improve sustainability of fashion. There is a huge amount of supply side of the business because everybody gets very keen with B2C. I think look at C, help B2B, and enable them to be super effective. So we'll make not only effective decisions, also make the planet very, very sustainable.